today we're going to do Azure Data Factory CI/CD. Thank you, Greg, for introducing me. But again, I'm Sean Mirabile, Senior Program Manager on the Fabric Cat team. So everything I do is Fabric Cat now. I started my career off as a SQL developer. Then I learned SSRS, and then from SSRS, I kind of went into the warehousing world, using SSIS and developing a big on-prem data warehouse. I think we had 21 terabytes at the time. Then from there, I learned the Azure stack by going to Coca-Cola in Atlanta. That's what brought me to Atlanta. I worked at Coca-Cola as a data engineer, and that's where I learned Azure Data Factory. About 10 years, I was a little generous on that as a BI professional, and my mission is to learn, teach, and repeat. Personal, I have 2 cats, Evie and Mr. B. They do throw up a lot as well. Sorry if you cut out the previous discussion on that, for those who don't know the context of that. But they are long hair, and they're adorable. Never-ending yard work. I'm on an acre of land with 2 ponds, so it's snakes, spiders, herons, all kind of wildlife. I'm in the gaming. We're talking about, World of Warcraft earlier. Concerts with my buddy George, who is in this. Yeah, there you go. My buddy George, who is in this meeting with us, and adventuring with my wife. And I built a little ramp for my niece and nephew over the weekend, and I was trying to teach them how to jump with a bike. So only one of them lost a nail, but other than that, it was pretty good. So today's agenda, I'm going to try to warm you up, so don't be intimidated by these images. We're going to start with like the kind of basic, how to enable Git integration with your Azure Data Factory workspace, kind of what the intended goals of engineering were with that, how to take that and do like a manual deployment, or not so manual, but a deployment to another environment. Then we're going to talk about ARM parameters and how to kind of parameterize your ARM template, Azure Resource Management template, so that when you deploy from, if you're working in an Azure dev workspace, Azure Data Factory dev workspace, that's pointing to like your dev SQL server. When you deploy that to test or prod, you want that link server, so that connection to then point to maybe your test or your production SQL server. So I'm going to show you kind of how to do that, and configure those parameters and automate those parameters. Then with those, we're going to get into, all the way up to that, we still have Azure, we're going to be using Azure DevOps. We have Azure DevOps deployment pipelines going to be deploying your ARM template, but there's still a manual intervention that's needed in the dev workspace to hit like a single button called publish. So we're going to dive into automated publishing. I spent probably like 3 hours debugging errors. We're going to do a live demo, pseudo-fresh environment. So if we run into too many errors, I might just pivot back to the PowerPoint and just talk through it. We can talk about some best practices. I'll probably just sprinkle these in throughout the session, just so we don't inundate everyone with that at the end. A&A, I just made this like as we were talking. Q&A at the end. We can throw Q&A in at any time as well. So best practices and Q&A can kind of go in anywhere. What you're seeing here in these images are kind of, I worked with a big enterprise customer based out in Europe for about 6 months. They were interested in, like, they were the DevOps guys at their company, right? And they're like, how do we do rollbacks, hot fixes? Like they were asking like, selective deployments, which aren't necessarily supported, but there's some branching strategies you can do to kind of get around that. And I do have a YouTube video talking about that. But really, this was the evolution of kind of the CI/CD like or architectural diagram, I don't know what to call it, workflow that I developed for them. So we went like bare bones, just kind of getting them with multiple features and a collaboration branch, to like more advanced using automated deployments and how do they handle hot fixes, to like a fully enterprise ready kind of solution for them that spans out like tens of teams and workspaces. It's pretty slick, and now they're moving to Fabric, but I think that they're still using this design today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I think I'm going to jump right in. So we're going to talk about Git integration. I'm going to get out of the PowerPoint so I don't kill you guys with slides. And I'll just kind of show you my environment. I'm using my personal um, Azure portal or Azure subscription. In here, this is my Azure Learning Center. George, you're probably familiar with this guy from back in the day when you were learning this stuff. But I have two resource groups. I created these today. So I have my dev and prod. Um, Again, the my naming conventions are kind of bad, so we're just gonna stick with two environments today. And it's gonna be dev and prod. I call things test. Test and prod are just the same thing in today's session, so apologies for that. But in my dev workspace, I have a ADF workspace. That's our dev workspace. I have an Azure Key Vault, and I have a SQL database. All right. So those are the kind of, we're really going to be focusing on this ADF workspace, but I just kind of had Key Vault and the SQL database to kind of show you how to move those from dev to test. So when we go back into our prod environment, you'll see that I do have ADF pub test, or prod, the same thing, but I went in here and I blew it all away. So there's no link services, there's no pipelines, there's nothing in here. It's a clean slate. Okay. So we're going to just deploy to a already existing workspace. You can deploy a workspace, like a net new workspace, but here I just kind of created a dummy workspace in case you want to like configure, your network configurations and stuff. So here's an empty workspace, and then there we go. And so I just have my test database and my test key vault and prod, whatever. So this is kind of the homepage of Azure Data Factory.
Real quick, Sean, just because we
Yeah.
had a comment on it and,
Yeah.
would love to get your perspective. Naming conventions. I see you have very consistent naming conventions everywhere. Can you like maybe shine some light on like what you'd suggest in naming conventions, especially around, workspaces,
Mhm.
resources, subscriptions? It's really confusing, right? Like, is there some rhyme to
Yeah.
your reason?
Yeah, and I mean, since you're the Azure user group, you might know that, not all Azure resources follow the same naming standards or conditions, right? So some you can have hyphens, others like ADLS Gen 2 are like you better not, you know. For me, I like to, because I do these kind of demos, I like to prefix it with like the resource acronym, Portland user group, and then hyphen the environment that it belongs to. That just over the years that seemed to work with me. I think we did that when I worked at Coca-Cola. Don't hold my hand to the fire with that. But
You can't say
I
that
th
name on here.
yeah. NDA. Uh, but yeah, so this is just what works well for me. Especially, you're gonna see, and I'll pop it up on here. We're gonna be like editing some kind of like YAML files, right? And it kind of helps me, especially with like parameters and stuff, like just kind of making sure that I'm pointing to the right resource if I have that kind of environment name in there. And you can change that name, and you'll see that when I deploy this ARM template, I'm actually changing the data factory name to test. So this is actually an ARM template parameter asking me for the workspace name. And we're going to see that. Um, I say, oh yeah. Did I see that? AKV, right? So I don't think I can have hyphens, SQL, pug, prod, right? So yeah, I like AKV. I know a lot of people do Key Vault, but I'm all about that Azure. Um, so just teasing. So the first thing we're gonna do is configure. So like right now as a developer, right? So like if I'm on a team, I'm in here, I'm just creating pipelines, right? So I just have like the sample pipeline and we can go in here and we can delete feature 2, delete feature 1, right? So it'll be deleted. So we get this message up here, will be deleted while publishing. So there's kind of like, it's not really here um, right now, but there is a concept of publishing in a live mode. So right now we're kind of like in live mode and we're kind of like redeploy it back to itself when we hit publish. So I just made some changes. We're not configured to Git integration. It's just this is the raw experience. Um, and this is not good practice for you to have multiple people working on this because if I change something or add a pipeline here, If my other developers working in the same pipeline, we could have conflicts, right? Because it's not updating consistently, right? So we want that kind of like, it just kind of, we can step on each other's toes. But so before I hit, so I just made a change. I deleted 2 data pipelines. But the first thing from like a best practice standard from just having experience of using this is just validate. So like I see this probably in every ADF or data pipeline session I do is validate early and often. It just going to validate the ARM template, or not the ARM template, like the JSON view. So if you didn't know, all Azure or all ADF kind of objects, the pipeline, the data sets, the entire thing has like a JSON object associated with it. So this is the JSON object of this data pipeline. We see the name of it, the properties with an array of objects, which contains each activity, has its own JSON object, and we have type properties. So type properties are very important. Understanding the JSON schema and what's available to you, I would say, is also very important if you want to master ADF data pipelines. But just in the back of your mind, just keep note of type properties, because this is going to come up later on when we get into automated publishing, or actually like parameters, ARM template parameters. So just remember that every item inside of ADF has a JSON object associated to it, and there's a thing called type properties, and a lot of these have type properties. It's like link services have type properties, data sets have type properties. This is the type property of the copy activity. So I'm going to go ahead and hit publish. Again, this is live mode. Publishing is just going to show us that what I did, right? So what changes I did. So I deleted these. So I'm going to publish it. It's kind of hard to explain what it's doing right now, but it's just saying, hey, publish complete. That way anybody else who navigates to this workspace right now will see exactly what I see. But let's say I'm working in a team, right? And I kind of want to have that transaction, because like, what if George, or my buddy George, just in this meeting, came in here and he deleted all the pipelines? I don't know George deleted the pipelines, but I want to know. So I'm going to go over to the Manage tab, and I can expand that. So we got authoring, the authoring panel, and then down here under Manage, we see Git Integration or Git Configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and configure this. Here is going to talk about select the repository type. So I'm going to use Azure DevOps Git. This is free. I have multiple, oh, I did have multiple tenants. Okay, so I'm logged in under a different user, Portland user group at Mirabile Sean Gmail. So this is linked to my enter ID of my Azure subscription or my Azure tenant. I'm going to hit continue here. And then I'm going to say, hey, what DevOps org name or DevOps org I want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and use Mirabile Sean. And which project? I'm going to use Pug, because my family has a bunch of Pugs in this Portland user group. And then we're going to do, so I don't want to use the Pug repository. That was actually a bad click. So I'm going to hit back, continue, probably Sean, and then Pug, and then repository name. It should say, I would think it would say create a new one. So I'm actually going to go into my Azure DevOps, go to repo, and I'm going to create a new repository. I'm going to just call this like Pug2. Like, or like, who let the pugs out? I'm going to regret that later, but it's okay.
Sean, you're on a roll. I'm loving it.
Okay, so we created a new empty repository called Who Let the Pugs Out. We're going to navigate back here. I'm probably just going to give it a good old refresh just so that, you know, it can pull that again. Git configure, Azure DevOps, go back to that my tenant, select Mirabile Sean, project name. Okay, it will be Pug, repository name, and then who let the pugs out. So here we're introduced to kind of some really important concepts here. I feel like maybe we do with the little I, like explain, like we have the collaboration branch. Select the branch that you'll collaborate with others in which you'll publish. So it's kind of like, well, okay, what is that? I like to do collaboration branch. Let's do collab. Let's make that the collab branch. I like naming those kind of similar, because you'll see like in the docs, like use the collab branch. Sometimes we say main, sometimes we say master. I just stick with the collab. And then we have the publish branch. So when you are working in ADF, right, you are kind of like you're going to have a collab branch, which is going to have its different file folder. It's going to have a different folder for link services, data sets, all kinds of, every object, right? But when you hit that publish, we did publish all earlier. What that does is going to validate, again, the JSON objects in the collab branch, and it's going to generate a ARM template. So it's going to consolidate all those various JSON files, one for each pipeline, one for each data set, right? It's going to consolidate that all into a single ARM template. And that's what we call the ADF publish branch, right? I'm going to leave the root folder as empty. This confused the mess out of me. And I'll show you where that confused the mess out of me, because I actually had to read another blog post understanding how to fix that. Because our docs are like, assume we did something here, right? And that's not cool. But I'm lazy. I didn't do anything, and our docs didn't account for that. So just kind of throwing that out there. But so we like this right here. We can always rename this again. Just, our docs always call it the publish branch. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to hit apply. So now, and then in here, it says import existing resources into the repository. So we know we had that single pipeline. This pipeline has a copy activity connecting to my SQL server. So if we go over to manage link services, we see I have an Azure Key Vault link service and a SQL Server link service, right? So those are 3 different objects. Now if we go back over to our Azure DevOps repository, I'll give it again, Azure Portal loves force reload, so I'm going to do that. Go over to the collab branch. So now we're in that collab branch because that's what we named it. And we see that the collaboration branch, as I talked about, broke everything down into different JSON files. So we have the definition of our Azure Key Vault link service, our SQL Server link service, and our Data Factory link service, and then our pipeline right here. So this is that pipeline 1, and this is that ARM template that we saw in the portal. So again, if we cancel out of here, go back here, and then we look at the JSON view of pipeline 1, that's what matches over here in DevOps in our repository. Okay, so back over here. So now that we have our Data Factory is Git integrated, we have this ability right here of a branch selector at the top. And thank you, Alex. I'm going to try to use, I think it's Control 2. Ooh, look at that, Alex. I'm learning the hotkeys. But
way to go.
I know. I had to refresh myself.
You're a pro, brother.
I know. Thank you. But here we have our collab branch, our main branch, which we probably just delete. I'm probably going to delete that branch because that's confusing. And then we have a publish branch that doesn't exist yet. We can create a new branch. So the idea here is that the collab branch is where all your feature branches are going to be merged into, right? And then you're going to publish your collaboration branch, and that's what's going to generate the ADF publish branch, and that's the ARM template that you're going to deploy. All right, so I wonder if I have a slide illustrating that. We'll see. Probably not. But it's cool if I don't. Publishing. Okay, so we get that. So to illustrate that, I'm going to create a new branch based off of collaboration, because collaboration is kind of like where all of, I'm working in a sprint, right? I have 3 developers, each of them working on their own feature, right? Which should be like their own artifacts. Like that's one of the best practices, right? When we have multiple developers working on a feature, you really want them to be working on their own items, right? You don't want them all working. If they are in the different feature branch, they should be touching different items. Okay, they can be working out of the same feature branch, touching the same items, but each feature should really be broken out. So like feature 2 and feature 3 shouldn't be editing the same pipeline at the same time. So let's just go ahead and type in feature 1. So we're in sprint 1, feature 1. Let's go ahead and
quick question, Steve. We've got a question in the chat. Does the publish branch get protected? If not, is it a good idea to prevent the ignorant Yes,
Yes.
ignorant from committing to it.
Yeah, yeah, and we're gonna see that with the automated publishing. Do some branch policies. Actually, I couldn't find that out. If you know how to do that, when we get to that, you can come off mute and kind of show me how. It's been like 2 years since I've had to do that. But that is actually what the docs say, is to lock down the ADF publish branch and even lock down the collab branch, so that
Yeah.
changes can't be made directly to those branches. You have to issue a pull request and get that approved for those changes to be committed.
I've been the ignorant, so it's burned into my memory.
Yes. If you haven't broken prod, you haven't done your job right. I don't know.
I
There
did
used to be
miss on that one. I'll keep trying.
you gotta bring down production at least once. We used to celebrate prod down because then you learn. Um, so now we're in our feature branch. If we navigate back to DevOps, and we look down here, we now have the feature one branch in here. So I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to keep it easy today, but we're just going to clone this pipeline. I'm going to call it feature two, and now we have a new feature. We have this little control 2. Oh, that is not it. What the heck? Oh, haha. Little square dot over here indicating that this hasn't been committed yet or saved. So control 2 again. So we have this option to say save all, save this pipeline. And what this is going to do is actually issue a commit. So if we save it, we're saying comment, add in pipeline feature 2. What are we adding? We're adding feature 2. So it's saving that pipeline. If we navigate back to DevOps and we look at commits, for feature 2, adding pipeline feature 2 just now. So that was a commit to our feature 2 branch, or feature 1 branch. Oh geez, my naming convention's all messed up. Don't worry about it. This is feature 1. I'm gonna actually save that. Adding feature 2 as feature 1. Thank you. Okay, so we did feature 1. So this is showing you that each time a person saves within their feature branch, that's actually a commit on that repository within that feature branch. Now, we need to get that back into a collaboration, right? So I'm going to go down to this drop down again. And let's say that like I've done my unit test, feature 1's looking great. I can, without committing it to collab or to the publish, which is live mode. So when we hit publish up here now, that Git integration is enabled, it actually is going to deploy that ARM template back to this resource, and that's what we call live mode. So right now we're in feature 1, we see feature 1 pipeline. If we go to collab, we just see pipeline 1. It doesn't live there. If I issue a pull request for feature 1 into collab, so I should delete that. Adding feature 1 pipeline. Let's go ahead and create that. Hopefully that main thing. And then I'm going to complete this. I can delete. Normally I just delete that branch. So I'm going to select that. Merging no merge complex, merging the pull request, right? Or in the Senate, yeah. So if I said that wrong, I'm sorry. And then over here, now if we give it a refresh anywhere, no, we'll just go get a good old refresh. So now into collab. So now our collab branch, we have feature 1. However, if we go to live mode, so live mode only has pipeline 1. So live mode is where if you have a trigger on a pipeline or anything, that's where what the trigger is going to run. Triggers are going to operate on the live mode. So it's actually deployed to your actual resource in Azure. Link services get automatically published and deployed to live mode. That's a little caveat you gotta know. But triggers and everything else are gonna operate under live mode. You can hit debug. So without having to publish, if I go back into my repository and like feature 1, you can always select debug to run a test of that pipeline. Now, debug is actually going to run that pipeline. So if you have a copy activity in here, it's actually going to copy and move data over. A lot of people get confused thinking that if I hit debug, it's just going to run through the pipeline, not do anything, like not actually move stuff. But it is going to move stuff. So if you hit debug, just know if you're pointing at like 3 petabytes, it's gonna sit there for a long time. Um, so just a FYI there. So now we're in the collab branch and we want to get this to live mode, right? So this is our dev. So traditionally, collaboration will be like you'll have all your features in here, and this is where you're going to kind of do like more testing, right? Make sure all the features work, and then you're going to hit publish and then start testing like your triggers. Like if you have an event trigger, you want to publish it and drop a file into like that storage account it's pointing to kind of make sure that that trigger is working, right? So we're going to hit publish. We're going to publish. So if we go back to DevOps and we go over to files, we have the collab branch, but now we have this new branch called ADF publish. So let me go back to collab. So again, we have dataset, factory, link services, pipeline, all these different folders. But when we go to publish branch, we have the ARM template right here. So this is the entire kind of everything we have in our workspace. Okay. So this is the artifact that's actually going to be deployed. And then we have, which we can use this later. We'll look at this later. But you also have parameters. So these are the parameters right here. And then when you deploy, you can point to this parameter file and like actually specify and version control the values you want in here. We're not really going to get into that, but I do recommend that. So like what I would traditionally do would have a parameter file for each environment, deb, test, and prod, really test and prod with the values in here. And then when I deploy it, I'll point to that specific file for that deployment stage. So I think we successfully configured Git integration with our ADF workspace. We talked about the collaboration branch. We issued a pull request from feature branch into collaboration. Then we published collaboration to generate the ADF publish branch, which then generated and gave us the ARM templates. Thank you. So if we just go in here, just a little recap. This is showing that I probably don't need to do that. I can probably just keep rocking and rolling. Spend all this time doing these slides.
Keep rocking, dude. Keep rocking.
Yeah, I don't like
Yeah,
slides.
show us. No, I mean, it's worth showing some slides. I mean, just give us a little primer, a primer.
Yeah, I was just kind of like it was just supposed to be like a kind of like a recap, right, of what we did. So we showed that we
cats in the slides would be cool, or maybe pugs, but you know, it's fine.
Pugs are like my worst enemy. But yeah, so this is we talked about it earlier, like how user 1 and user 2 won't see those pipelines. So this is just me on two different tabs showing that, hey, user 1 only sees pipeline 1, where user 2 sees pipeline 2. How to configure Git, right? We just configure the repository, select that. Remember, you specify the collaboration branch. I like to use collab, and I like to keep ADF publish. And then the configure repository kind of always shows you kind of what you set up there. Alex, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, this is a question I had received earlier this week too. Any strong preference between Azure DevOps and GitHub?
I've always used DevOps.
There we go.
I've never used GitHub or GitHub Actions.
Awesome. Well, if anyone in the chat has used either or, love to hear from you. Thank you, Sean.
I use both. They're very well integrated now, so that it's almost just a matter of personal preference. GitHub, everything is very repo centric, which can be nice if you have like your one repo and you kind of want everything associated with that. If you have a large sprawling team that's already familiar with Azure DevOps, then all the structure that goes into an Azure DevOps project can be great, like having multiple repos and everything linked in there. But I mean, you can even link like a GitHub pull request to an Azure DevOps work item pretty seamlessly now. I mean, it's very tightly integrated and it's really nice. Putting your actual repo in GitHub, I have a lot of repos in Azure DevOps, and I'm starting to just leave them in GitHub and just tinker with them there and then integrate them with Azure DevOps.
Thank you, Steve. No, that's and like I think when I first learned how to do this, that integration was not good, and it came from like
Exactly. It was not.
Yeah, yeah, and then like
It's
yeah.
good now.
Okay, and the powers that be told us we're using Azure DevOps. I just kind of, it's easy to set up for me too. Like, you know, it was just really easy for me to set up.
Yeah, I mean, once you're familiar with it, it's fine. It is fun to learn new things. So you want to poke around with GitHub just to say you've done it.
Never. I'm sure. I'm a one-trick pony. I'm gonna be talking about ADF CI/CD when I'm like.
You're like, I
60.
barely got this working. Now you want something new?
Yeah. um. Thank you for asking the question. We talked about, showing that the ADO repo had the collab branch. We showed how to create a new branch and how that new feature branch showed up pretty instantly in ADO. We showed that saving all issued a commit to the feature. And then once that feature is you're done unit testing, you want to go ahead and create a pull request and merge that feature back into collaboration. I do recommend deleting that feature branch if you're done with it, right? Again, you might want to keep it if you want to do something like rollback or something. But just to clean it up, I just been deleting it. Then when we're in the collaboration branch, we have to manually select publish which is going to generate the new changes from the collaboration branch. It's going to show you your pending changes. You're going to hit OK, thank you. It's going to deploy those changes, publish them, generate that ARM template. So that's that ADF publish branch. So after generated that ARM template, that's within the ADF publish branch, and you have the ARM template for factory.json. And you can see that you now have the live mode with all your pipelines in there. So now we're going to talk about how to deploy to another environment. So let's get to it. So I have now back in Azure DevOps, I have my ARM template. So now what I can do, I can navigate to pipelines. I can do releases. So I'm going to create a new release pipeline. I'm going to stick with an empty job. And I can say, no, I want to release this. Who let the pugs out? Right? That's my pipeline.
Who?
There, thank
Somebody,
you.
I just had to do it.
No, I almost typed it too. Thank you. And I'm going to add an artifact. So I'm actually going to add that ARM template. So I'm going to navigate to my Azure repo as a source type. Navigate to pug and who let the pugs out repository. My default branch is going to be the ADF publish branch. And I'm going to keep it like that. So source alias, I'm going to add that guy. So now I have an artifact. So there's that. So, and I can actually go in here with a trigger and say, hey, when a push occurs where I'm including, I think this is how I did it. Might not work. I'll look at the PowerPoint if this doesn't work. But every time we issue or we select publish up here, right, and it does a pull request to to the ADF publish branch, it's going to automatically kick this off. Again, if you are like, Sean, you're dumb, that's wrong. We'll address that later. And then I'm going to go into stage. So I have stages. So stages are kind of going to be like tests and prod, right? So this is going to be prod because we're just going to go straight to prod. So I'm going to name that. And I'm going to select on one job, 0 task. So this is going to open up this agent job. I'm going to say add tasks to the agent job. And then in here, we can search for ARM because we have an ARM template. So we're going to do ARM template deployment. Now, I'm skipping something, but I'll get to it after I do this. If you've done this before, you know what I'm skipping, but it's okay. So we're going to, deploy ADF to prod, right? I'm going to say deployment scope is a resource group. I'm going to say, hey, this is my subscription, resource manager connection, my subscription. I'm going to create or update a resource group. We are going to point to production resource group. I'm going to just do East US2. and I'm going to say linked artifact. So the artifact that I linked with there. So I'm going to say, hey, it's asking me for the template. So it's asking me for that ARM template. So I'm going to hit the little ellipses over here. That's going to pop open the folder. So this is a linked artifact. That's what we did in the very first thing when I linked it to that ADF publish branch. I'm going to go here, navigate down, and then select on the ARM template and select OK. All right, so now we're pointing to the system default working directory and pointing to that JSON file. You can do the same thing with the parameters file. So we'll navigate here, go down, select the parameters file, and select OK. Overwrite parameters are pretty important. We go in here to see if there's anything in here. So here, the ARM template has parameters. So if I didn't show you that, I will show you that in a second. But if we look at this file, I guess I can. I'll do that in a second. But the ARM template has parameters, and there's some things that we are going to want to change. So I'm going to just hit OK because I find it a little easier to change it here. But the factory name is not going to be called dev. We actually named it test because I am consistent. So it's going to be, I'm going to change that to test. Azure Key Vault, that's fine. We can point to the test key vault if we want to. I'm going to keep that dev because I don't think I actually added that key today. And then SQL Pug dev, I think, what did I call this? SQL Pug prod. So we're going to name this. So we're going to actually point to our SQL Pug prod database.windows.net. My database is still called prod. So this is we're now pointing to or telling the workspace when we deploy it to modify that link service to use this new SQL Server endpoint, pointing to my production SQL Server, right? And then we're going to select it, and that's it. So we kind of overwrite this. So earlier I talked about you have this ARM template parameters for JSON file. In more advanced scenarios, I like to kind of have one per each environment and then have all these things already defined so I don't have to define it here in the override template, right? And just so that there's versioning on this file so I can see when things change. However, there's a maintenance cost to that for when you add new parameters, right? So if I added another link service to like a different SQL database, we're going to get another ARM template parameter. So I just have to know as a developer to go in here and update that parameter JSON file manually. One thing, so I don't know, Alex, what's the hotkey for like explosions and stuff? Whatever.
I think we just go off mute and say.
And Steve,
So
like,
we
I
get
see your
some
hand
reactions.
up.
We need a fireworks reaction. Can we get that to the product team at Teams?
Is there ideas at teams.com?
Oh, there is.
Oh, let's do it. So, thank you, Alex. This is important. Deployment
All of a sudden,
mode.
Steve's got his hand raised. If you want to call him.
I know, but this is the fireworks.
All right.
This is
I'm
real
not gonna
life.
for fireworks. That's craziness.
I know, grand finale. So, this is how you break production. You select complete.
Steve does have a quick question, real quick. I think Steve
Okay.
has his hand up for
All
that.
right, all right.
Steve,
Well,
you want to jump
I'll
in?
wait till production down.
Yeah, we'll
later.
break production next. So I always get a little concerned whenever config data gets coded into a release pipeline because that's literally the only place it is, and it can get changed and then lost or forgotten. I'd much prefer to have it, in a version control coded in with, who did what, pull request, and all that good structure. So is there a way to get Azure Factory to produce a parameters file that's appropriate for the environment instead of overriding, or could we use one of those Azure pipelines environments instead?
Let's just do it. I'm gonna hit save, and then I'll teach you how to break production.
Yeah, deployment mode complete. Very bad.
Yeah, there you go. Stop ruining. Stop spoiling.
Am I stealing your thunder? All right, I'll let you wreck it. You can actually show it.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna go back into, I think, publish, and we are going to copy all this. I'm going to say here, new file, prod params.json, and then I will do prod pug dev test, right? Test commit. So what we did was you were asking like, hey, I don't like how you hard code those values in here. I want it as a file that's version controlled, right?
Exactly. That's kind of one of those core DevOps best practices.
So here you go. Boom. And this is what I was talking about. You just have to, because these parameters, especially when we get later on into the session, are going to, it's going to get ridiculous, right? So you're going to have to
produce a different one for prod and a different one for test and all that? Or
it won't produce it itself that I
Okay.
know of. So it's like you would almost have to keep it in sync yourself. Like when this guy updates, kind of like make sure this guy gets updated, right?
Yeah, that's not super ideal either.
We're in the
Keeping things
data
in sync.
space, man. At least we're not doing like
Yeah,
DAC
I do too.
packs and database projects. And
Well, I figure DBA folks, they cringe about data normalization, one
Yeah.
place.
So hello everybody, I'm Sunil from the PG side, right? If you see ADF,
Sunil.
right? Yeah, so ADF is the kind of first ETL product in the market at past having a built-in CI/CD, right? You see built-in CI/CD, no Informatica data stage, nobody had it, right? And when we did this kind of change, right, we knew you to prod dev stage, right? So we took some cuts, right? Like you asked automatically generating this file, right? Automatically to other environment. But when you go to other environments, your AKV will change, your link services will change, your users will change, right? That's why, because so many changes will happen, right? That's why we need to automate, we automated the publishing, but not the, this YAML generation, Yeah.
Feature request for Abhishek, Sunil.
Yeah.
I'm already
Now,
thinking about like a
Abhishek
GitHub
design-
action that takes care of that for you. So it can be
nice.
done
Yeah.
through horrible hacks.
Yeah, we don't have a GitHub Actions. Yeah.
We see another
Thank you,
hand
Sunil.
raised.
Yes, Siva.
Since you are saying that first when we create the parameters on the ARM template, and then if we want to pass the parameter values to prod or test or state, so every time if there is any new parameter added, so do we need to add it manually?
It will bring it in because your ARM template has the parameters here, and then it generates this parameter file as well. But if it adds like a new one in here, it's going to use the default, right? And so what that means is that your production could still be pointing back to dev. Now, I will show you in the next section how you can make it not put a default value here so that it'll fail. So that means it'll try to deploy an empty string and it'll fail deployment and let you know. So at least, your deployment will fail, but you're not deploying a link service that's pointing to a dev or test environment, right?
Yeah.
And I'll show you that. Good call
Thanks.
out, because I think that's something I missed in my PowerPoint. But yeah, so this is just like, I've seen this, especially like if you're not making like, after your initial like, we're doing 1,000 pipelines and doing all these projects, like after kind of go live and your team is kind of settled down, you're not doing like 1,000, 100 pipelines a week, right? This won't be so bad to manage, but it is an effort, and it's a manual effort that you should make part of like your practice, right? It's to make sure that if you're overriding or if you're using those parameter files to kind of make sure that you have that you're kind of doing that right. So we created the prod one. If this breaks, I'm blaming Steve. So we're gonna do prod params right here, and we're not gonna overwrite anything, right? I guess we can bring this in and just see if those values are good. So we're pointing the test, we're pointing the prod, so that all those values look good. So let's just delete those. and then we're going to hit save. We're going to hit save. So now let's go back in here. I think I set up the automated deployment. So we go back to releases. We failed, that's fine. But if we go back over here, and let's just make a little test in collab, which isn't good. So we're just going to say test in here, save that, save that. We're going to publish this with this little description. All we did was change the description, hit OK, and it should do that pull request in the background, deploying. It's generating that ARM template. Then it's going to do a pull request back to ADF publish. So back over here in the repo, we go ADF, we'll go commits, and this one is in progress. All right. So here's the description of test. And then we see that this is in progress. So we go back to releases and we go here. So when I hit publish over here and I published collaboration branch, it automatically kicked off this release because I set up this continuous deployment trigger here to enable continuous deployment trigger and include the ADF publish branch. So this is deploying, and we can see that it was successfully deployed the prod. So now we're going to go back to our sudo prod /test. So right now we have 0 pipelines, 0 link services. So let's go ahead and give it a good refresh. And now we have 2 datasets, 2 pipelines with feature 1 in here, and we see our test description. And we see those link services right here too. So our changes did make it in the prod as soon as we hit publish on the collaboration branch. Now, hopefully you would have kind of like checks and balances in place, right? So that's a good starting area for like a new team who's using Azure Data Factory, and they want to have Git integration with deployments, right? But it doesn't meet kind of every scenario. And a lot of CI/CD teams would be like, we don't want you. Well, first off, what if I want to parameterize additional properties within this kind of link service, right? There's a lot of things. So basically, like I said, remember that type properties I showed you? Basically anything that's a type property, you can make that an ARM template parameter, right? You can make pretty much anything an ARM template parameter. Back in my day, we had to manually do this, but thank you, Sunil and his team for baking this into the product. And that's going to be automate or changing the ARM template parameters. Do we have any questions? Because I'll do a little summary and then we'll get to that. Yeah, praise you, Sunil.
Any
Sean,
questions?
do you have any question for me? Sean,
No.
did you
I'm
have
just
any
giving you.
question for
I'm
me?
just giving you kudos.
We're
I'm
giving
doing
you
my
kudos
thing.
and props.
No, hey, see, I have worked with Sean for last 3 to 4 years. Before his current job, he has worked, with the big customers, in these kind of scenarios. He's an orchestration guru also, right? So I'm learning everything, so I've learned a lot from him. Yeah.
Mhm.
We will see.
I love you,
It's the way to
Sunil.
be.
Yeah.
Okay. So just as
So no questions. It sounds like no questions. So yeah, go for it.
Okay. So we did. So we just successfully. That's really hard with a Invisalign. Deployed to another environment. Okay. We showed how to create a new release pipeline and porting that to our ADF. Setting the artifact to our ADF publish branch. We showed. So that's here as well. Sorry. Dual slide. We showed creating a stage to production and creating a new agent job task for ARM template deployment, where we pointed the template to our ARM template for factory and our template parameters to this parameters file. We did bonus content on creating a new parameter file, ARM template parameter file for a specific environment, so we didn't have to do overwrite. Then we went ahead and so instead of creating a release, we set up a trigger, which I think I talked about over here. And then we issued a new, we modified the collaboration branch and we published that, and that automatically triggered the deployment to our production environment. So change that to capture, and then we showed that before the deployment we had 0 pipelines. After the deployment we had 2 pipelines. So, and then here's just kind of showing you how to set up that continuous deployment trigger, where you just hit the little lightning bolt icon, you enable it, you point to ADF publish, then every time you publish, it'll create, you know, that commit right there, and then kick off that new release pipeline. Since I'll go back, since you killed my thunder, but a big no-no. So what I'm doing is I'm navigating back to my prod stage under job and task. I'm navigating back to this ARM template parameter. The worst thing you can do is hit complete right here. I don't even know why it's a thing, but that's something like delete everything in that resource group, like but this ADF workspace. We had like, we were almost done with a, deletes resources out of that, everything but the template you're deploying. We had my peer did that, and we were frantically on a phone call with Microsoft support for hours trying to get them to roll it back. And thankfully they were able to, but it was a big crap show. So never hit complete. Thank you, Steve. Worst thing you can do, use complete. Don't do that. All right. So now we are going to get into ARM template parameters. Because this is going to really open up the floodgates for you, and it can also add some challenges as well. But this is really going to give you the power to anything that you have in dev that you want to modify between environments. This is how you can do it. So what we're going to do is go down to manage in our dev. So we're back in our dev. We're going to select on manage. Then we're going to go down to ARM template right here. So boom, boom, control, and then say edit parameter configuration. This is going to generate this ARM template parameters definition.json. So it's a new file in our repository, and this is going to have a whole slew of things, right? And it has these weird notations. I think, and it's broken out by factory, global parameters, pipelines, integration runtimes with all the type properties. So all these now, if they exist, all these type properties like SSIS properties, catalog information like server endpoint, admin username, right? All these things, if they exist, are going to become ARM template parameters. There's one per. So if we go down, so we have it for triggers, but if we go down to link services, so link services is basically saying, hey, for all types of link services. So this is really, if we look down here into our repo, we can kind of compare and contrast this real quick. And we go into our ARM template, right? We have let's find a link service. Link service reference.
When you get to a good stopping point, got a quick question for you.
Okay. Let me finish this and I will. This link service right here, so this is a link service and it's a type SQL server. So I could go into here and put in SQL server right here, right? And then it would only adjust the properties or create those properties that exist in SQL server as ARM template parameters. I believe it is, what is it? Equal sign is going to use the current value as a default. So we were talking about, hey, how do you prevent that default, right? So if you didn't change it, if you forgot to change it, it would use the default. So then you're at risk of pointing to a dev workspace. I think you can just do, and there's documentation in here on like the actual syntax here. Let's see if we can find that. Use custom parameters. And then right here, so So it'll be the minus sign, or hyphen means you don't keep the default parameter. Equals means you keep the default parameter. So I will paste this link in here and then go ahead and ask that question.
Oh, I was just thinking more
Yes.
about the complete. I was saying that if there were a completely dedicated resource group, that might make sense. But honestly, I agree with you that it's a dangerous thing to have there.
Yeah. And then Gregory, did you have a question too?
No, it was that question / comment. He was talking about the
okay.
complete mode and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, Sunil might kill me, but you know, ADF wasn't meant to have like 1,000 pipelines. So you know, ideally you should probably have a
What?
different
We're not supposed to have
workspace.
1,000 pipelines?
Yeah.
No, guys. Hey, here I'll tell you, right? So the biggest telecom company in this country, they have 4,000 pipelines managed by ADF. Okay, till now. Okay, I'm telling you, that's true. It's not. So it all depends on how many factories you have and how you manage those factories, right? So I know we have some limits per factory, but but subscription level limits, but you can have. Okay. Yeah.
And there's ways to do that with like linked templates, right? The
Yeah.
deployed linked ARM templates, because you get into the 4 megabyte limitation of an ARM template itself, not an ADF limit, but you get into the limitations of ARM templates,
Mhm.
which seems to be a trend, right? Normally we get into other limitations, not ADF limitations.
Yeah, so just to be aware, right, there are a couple of limits, right? 256 parameters and 4
Yes.
megabytes. Those two, okay?
Yeah. Don't we have a limitations doc? We can find that maybe.
Yeah. Guys, if you can just type ADF resource limits, Google, you'll find the page, okay?
Yeah.
ADF resource limits, yeah.
Yep. But yeah, so we'll just use the default. So we're talking about like, I would, if you are going to use this JSON file, right? So use this thing. So like anytime I create any link service, right? This is what this is saying. Anytime I create any link service, that's what that star is for. If these type properties exist within that link service, it's going to automatically create a new ARM template parameter for that link service for each of these type properties that exist, and it's going to use default. So if I find this extremely helpful, because I used to actually have to go in here and manually create parameters, like back in my day, create parameters and then go in here and inject them everywhere. Okay. Now we allow you to use this thing, which is automatically gonna, when it's generating that ARM template, it's going to read this file and say, oh, I see a link service with username. I'm gonna make that a parameter and use the default value. Now, if you're gonna use this, I recommend specifying the link service types and only selecting the type properties that you actually want to use, right? And keep it very lean. Else you're just going to have a lot of unnecessary parameters, and you're going to definitely hit that 256 parameter limitation on ARM templates, right, Sunil? You can hit that really quickly, right? So I highly recommend you be hyper specific in here with what you want to parameterize and what type of link services, because it's going to be for every link service to SQL Server. That's going to enable that, right? So we're just going to go ahead and discard that. And then let's see. I think we're good. I already did that. I don't know why oh, okay, because I use a different connector. But that's kind of what I want to explain there. This is like an amazing feature. Again, I used to have to manually go in there and add different parameters for everything I wanted to parameterize. Here, we automate that parameter generation. It's just our default one that we create for you out of the box. Like, has so many things it's parameterizing, just to kind of show you, like, so I would think that you would start with this and just delete a bunch of rows and only keep what you need. Do we have any questions on using the ARM template parameter definitions.json file.
I think
And
we
like
have
kind
more questions about Bing versus Google in the chat, but yes, continue.
you should always Bing and never Google.
Oh, wow. Sean, you have really taken part with Alex. You guys' minds have melded.
Yeah, man.
And Steve says you see someone secretly uses DuckDuckGo here.
I even have my wife saying she's gonna Bing stuff when she's talking on her work meetings. You know?
Wow. The hive
Support
mind.
the family. Use Bing.
Yeah, that is true. So, I
use
guess I got a
Firefox
Bing.
with their 0 day. It's not so zero.
But anyway, back to ARM templates.
Okay.
Anybody else questions on ARM templates before we digress?
And how are we on time? Do we have like 20
I mean, we could be
minutes?
here till tomorrow, Sean. So, but we could. I mean, for as long as you got.
I got cold Chick-fil-A sitting on the kitchen table.
We got to get this man to dinner. So, Sean, if you want to get through this last section, I think you've been doing fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, then we can wrap up.
Okay, so just letting you know, this is an awesome thing. You hit OK, it's going to add that into your repository. And it's going to, when you hit publish, it's going to read that file. So it's going to add it to collaboration under here somewhere. Then when you go into publish, it's going to, now you're going to have a bunch more, potentially a crap ton more parameters. So just forewarn there, it's powerful, just be specific. I think I've said that 1,000 times. Hopefully if you leave out of here, you understand that if you're going to use the ARM template parameters definition JSON file, you are hyper specific. Okay, so let's discard that. So as a developer, right, so I am going to create a new branch. I'm going to call this feature 2. All right, it might yell at me because I feel like we already did that. I'm going to clone this pipeline again, call this feature 2, say test feature 2, and I will save it. It's committing to that branch. I'm going to say, oh, this is awesome. It works well. I'm going to create a pull request from feature 2 into collaboration. I'm going to continue to test. We'll go ahead and merge that in here. That's going to then bring that in. So now we see feature 2 into our collab branch. I'm doing my unit testing. Everything looks good. It plays nice with the other pipelines in there. I've debugged it. It works great. I'm going to publish it in live mode so that I can test it now with like a scheduled trigger or an event trigger or a tumbling window trigger. And it's awesome. But I still had to hit publish, right? As a DevOps person, like I might not necessarily want to manually hit publish. So what we did was we created a whole different way so you never have to do hit this manual publish thing. And that's what we're going to do. We call this automated publishing. And this is kind of the current CI/CD flow. We have our feature branches, collaboration branches. You hit publish, it generates the ARM template in there. And then you deploy so that publish branch automatically gets deployed to dev. This publish branch goes through the release DevOps release process and gets pushed out to QA and prod, right? That's that manual step. Now, we are going to use an NPM package and a YAML file to automate that process. And what we're going to do is and it's going to automatically, so now the DevOps release process is going to deploy to dev as well, right? So each user makes changes in their private branches. Push to master isn't allowed. So I think Steve, you asked this earlier. Users must create a pull request to make changes, right? So I think you sent the link on how to do that, right? Alex, you have a question.
Yeah, you had mentioned 2 acronyms really quickly there, NPM and then YAML. Can you explain what those mean?
No.
Doesn't YAML rule the world?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
what does YAML stand for?
Yet
This
another
is
markup language.
Yet another
That's it.
markup
Yeah.
language.
Yeah. And then npm NuGet package manager.
NuGet package. Like you're like on. Are you on the acronym AKMS acronyms or whatever?
My brain is an index
Oh,
for all the random stuff.
mine's a freaking goldfish.
Actually, I think npm is Node package manager, right? Sorry.
It does say use Node right here.
Oh, there we go. Even better.
Installs
Update the
Node
index.
and the Node packages. Yeah, update your index. All right, so yeah, so it's going to use this cool little Node package manager, and we're going to be editing this. Basically, it's going to validate your dev workspace, right? The branch. So you're going to say trigger on some branch. So we're going to trigger on collab. It's going to validate that. Then once it passes validation, it's going to build and export that ARM template, and then we're going to use that to deploy. So here's a little graphic that I've done. Collaboration branch, feature 2, or commit 1, commit 2. We go to release branch, and then it's going to do the automated publishing. It's going to install Node.js, install npm package, copy deployment files, run build validation, export that ARM template, and publish that artifact for that release pipeline to use. So it's going to generate that artifact. Then the dev stage. Here's something we haven't talked about. When you have triggers, especially storage event triggers, you have to stop the triggers. And we have a article on that. Pre and post deployment script. It's called the pre and post deployment script, and this is going to pause the triggers. So this is important. Kind of, I think I'll probably go into why. But right here, if we zoom in, we have that Azure Resource Management deployment task that we've been using. But in a real production scenario, you're going to want to run this PowerShell script that we provide. I'll put the link in the chat. And this is going to kind of like delete those triggers and then, or like stop them, which if you have an event trigger, it creates an event subscription on the storage account. And what this does, it will actually like delete that event subscription. But those are details. Deploy that ARM template, so deploy the changes to those triggers, and then you're going to start those triggers again. Okay. Sunil, I don't know if you know exactly why we had to do this, and we couldn't just deploy it. It's been a long time, but just letting you know, if you have triggers, especially event triggers, you're going to want to do this. Start and stop those triggers, or stop and then start those triggers. But just to kind of give you a little hint at that. But yeah, so then you're going to stop the triggers, deploy your ARM template, delete the resources. So that's what that start does. So it deletes any unnecessary resources, like if you delete a pipeline stuff, and then it's going to start those triggers again. And then that's going to your dev data factory. So you're no longer publishing, you're just working on your feature branch, and every time you deploy to collab, it's going to kick this process off, and it's going to deploy to live mode, right? So that you're constantly getting updates to your dev environment. And then what we'll do, I think down here, is you'll have like, so this is, we don't have to go through all this, but what I like to do is have like a release branch, right? So once that is there, we then, so we know that that collab branch works, or that release branch worked. So we want to then deploy that same artifact to test, and that same artifact to production, right? And that might be a little confusing, but we'll get through it. So we are going to go back into our pipelines. I'm going to go back into this who let the dogs out. I'm going to edit this and just disable this guy so it doesn't run 1,000 times. I'm going to hit commit. Now what we are going to do is we're going to go back to our repo, and the documentation says, so we're going to go to our collaboration branch. And I'm going to create a new folder. So we're going to do new folder, and this is going to be like deployment files, right? And then I think it's going to say package.json. I think I can look at the Visual Studio. Yeah, package.json. So what we're going to do, and we'll actually look at the automated publishing for CI/CD. We're going to look at and follow the docs for this just so that we see kind of, that's where I stole the screenshots from, just to get the code. So it's going to say, hey, add a package.json file to your repository. So we're going to copy this JSON code, go back into our repository. We added, this isn't it. We have the deployments, so we're going to add a new file name, package.json, right? And then hit create. We're going to stub that code in there, a little JSON object in there, talking about the node modules for the Azure Data Factory utilities library. Hit commit, that's fine. Then we're going to do we're going to go back over to pipelines, and we're going to create a pipeline. So I don't know how to, so we're going to do new pipeline. So this is going to be a build pipeline. And we're going to say Azure repositories Git a YAML file. Okay. So, and we're going to select the who let the dogs out repository. You can do starter pipeline here. And then what we're going to do is paste in. So they provide you the code right here, this YAML file. And we can go in here, and I will just do this from scratch with you guys because I ran into some issues. So we're going to delete everything in there, paste that in there. Pretty easy. So now we just kind of go in here and we go through the prompts, right? The comments. So this is saying collaboration branch. So we named our collaboration branch collab. So that's what we want to trigger on. And then we'll just scroll down and it says, hey, replace with the package.json folder. So folder da 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 da. I can just do Control H, and we call this deployment files, right? Lose my mind. Deployment files. All right, and then in here, so we're just pointing to deployment files folder, so we can get that package.json file that we created. The next up, I don't know if I can do that. Go ahead.
Again, I want to comment for everybody's knowledge, right? If you do GitHub Actions or few Synapse, right? They use Node.js to do everything, right? But in the ADF world, we do everything with Python. Okay, that's a npm node package, right? And in GitHub Actions, right? There are some other you can use pure JavaScript, right? That's what I want to say, right? So that whole npm package and then everything, right? We basically orchestrate a container, right? And this npm module, does all the deployments for you. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Sunil.
Yeah.
So here, right here, it says custom command run build validate. So we talked about this earlier. I briefly showed you earlier that this is going to be the command to validate. Remember, we validate early and often. When you hit publish, it's going to validate all your files, and then kind of before creating that ARM template. Then it says / root folder configuration. However, when I set up my Git configuration, I didn't do a root folder. So that confused me because I was like, what do I put there? And I was just fat finger and stuff. So seriously, and there's a space here. I didn't catch that either. So you just delete this guy right there. And we can do that down here too. If you don't have a root folder, we're just going to use the local path. Then you're going to put in your subscription and everything. And then I already have that. So I'm going to just pop that in there. So basically all I did was just paste in my subscription ID, my resource group dev, and I'm pointing to ADF pug dev. This will be my ARM template, which is what we're calling the artifact. So here, we're going to save it, and we're not going to run it. Commit to the main branch. Oh, why is it called main? Oh, I messed up. We'll see if this works. I might have messed up. All right. So go back over here. Deployment files. I might have messed up. Because when I created the branch, I think I already had like a main branch, which is the default one. So how do we go to manage repository? And we get to our branch setting, branches. Come here. Set as default branch. Delete branch. Get out of here, main. There we go. I think that'll work. Okay. Let's see if we broke this. Alright. Let me do this again. Sorry about that. I messed up when I first created it. Starter pipeline. There. YAML ... Save. Save directly to the collab branch. That's what I wanted. Okay. Alright. So we have over here, and we have this Azure pipelines.yaml file. Okay, and we have that package.node. So now we're going to go back to pipelines, go to releases. I'm going to create a new release. We're going to do empty job. Who automated letting the dogs out, the pugs out?
You're just having fun with it at this point, Sean.
I am. I know. And then we're going to add an artifact, and we're actually going to do a build. So we're pointing to our pug project. What is this? 3. Who let the pugs out? Whatever. I don't know what that 3 is. Live demo. We're going to add it. Hopefully that works. Include collab. I think that works. And then after release, job, and then we're going to do the same thing here. But here we're going to point back to dev. So this is going to be Azure Learning Center, subscription, creator update, resource group. We're going to point back to dev. Go here. We're going to do East, USS2, sure. Template. And then this is pointing to that linked artifact, that build. So this will be the output of that YAML file. It never happened. So we're going to hit OK. We're going to hit save. We're going to hit save. Go back to pipelines. All. Who let the pugs out? No runs yet. Let's run this pipeline. Collab. And run this guy. Let's see if this works. So what we're going to do is we're going to, kind of like how we talked about earlier, was in this release, who automated the pugs out. This stage 1 is going to be dev, right? And then we're going to add a new stage, empty stage, called prod, or like test, right? But in our case, it's prod. And then, so we're going to automate deploying prod, and then post deployment description, pre-deployment descriptions, we might need to like make an approval, right? And kind of say like, pug needs to approve this guy, right? So you don't automatically deploy to prod. So you're going to constantly be deploying versions to dev, and then whatever version pass all your tests and you're ready to go to prod or ready to go to test, you're going here and you can approve it, right? Or whatever DevOps constraints you want to put in place there, you can do that. So let's go back up here. and error, no such. Oh, that's because I'm stupid. And then we'll go edit. Because I renamed my stuff, repository, leave. Who let the docs out? We called collab, deployment files, and then go back over here. That's what I get for copy and pasting. Deployment files, deployment files, deployment files. I think that's good. Validate and save. And we'll run this. So we're just running this manually now to generate that ARM template so that when we create the release pipeline, we have something we can point to. Do we have any questions while we have this running? Are you thoroughly confused yet?
Any questions? I think we're mostly thoroughly amused, not confused.
Okay.
Alex's questions.
Yeah, so Sean, a lot of this code that you've kind of been doing here with Azure Data Factory, my company's been evaluating like Fabric. Is there a way that I could take this code and kind of deploy it into that new version of Fabric Data Factory, or how should I think about this underlying code base?
Migrating past the SaaS.
Yep. Is it easy to do? Can I do it right now? Is the body the same?
You know, there are differences, right?
Okay.
So when we talk about Fabric, Fabric uses the concept of connectors, whereas ADF uses the concept of link services, right? While in Fabric, you do have every data pipeline is associated to a workspace, and there's a JSON view of that. So like your pipeline, it's like every time you create a pipeline in your workspace, it's still going to have this JSON object defining that pipeline. But you're not going to see link service references and stuff. Also, there's no global parameters, so there's like feature parodies between the two products, like global parameters. There's no mapping data flows, SSIS integration runtime, kind of things like IRs. But we do have. Are we allowed to announce or talk about private previews here?
Oh, please. I will say what you just mentioned was such a key differentiator. So hopefully everybody took note of that.
Yeah, there's quite a bit, and Sunil, I don't know. You're from the engineering side. It's a moving target. We're working on we're going to call it upgrade instead of migrate. We're working on an upgrade pathway for people who are currently in Azure Data Factory and want to migrate or upgrade to Fabric data pipelines. We do have a private Git repository, so it's like private access, but I think it's under Microsoft open source, which is kind of like a CLI-based point to a Fabric or point to an Azure Data Factory workspace, and it'll do an upgrade and deploy those using the APIs to your Fabric workspace, and that's the private preview. I just don't know. I think we have a meeting later this week on this, on kind of like the direction of that, and if we're taking that further.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is there's not a clear path right now for like a seamless migration, but that is something that Microsoft is actively working on. So
yes,
if we are interested in such a capability, to contact our Microsoft account teams.
Yes, sir. Oh, you're so good at this.
You're amazing, Sean. Thank you.
But yes. Yeah, so we are. It's a lot of feedback we're getting. We would love to hear your feedback. Please contact your Microsoft reps and let them know this is something you want. Alrighty, let's see if. Oh, look, we got a green success.
Yay!
Woo! Oh, geez.
Who let the pugs out?
Oh man. Okay, so now we can go back to releases, who let the pug, oh, who automated letting the pugs out? What a jerk. Probably smart. And then we'll go in here. So this is, we actually have we should have an artifact now, because this is pointing to that build artifact. Available. Hopefully I pointed it to the right one. We will see here in a second. We'll go down here, template, ARM templates, and look, now this populates. So now because we built that once, it was able to look at the latest build and get that ARM template for factory. I do not have, so let's talk about that prod one. So right now we just have that production one. But what if we wanted to do that prod stuff? So now, excuse me, we're entering into new territory. So we're going to go back into ADF publish. We're going to snag these values right here. prod.params.json. I'm going to snag that because now we're not even creating an ADF publish branch anymore. We're not doing any of that. All right, with this automated publishing, like the ADF publish branch is out of the window. Don't think about it. Let's go into deployment files, add a new file, and then let's just do like prod params, right? Create .json. All right, yeah, .json, and we'll pop in those values. Hit commit. Now that I committed to collab, I think that would have created a new release. Oh, I think I did twice for some reason. I don't know what this thing is. I don't know what this 3 means. Anyone knows what this 3 is? Let me know. Come off mute. Let me know where I messed up. But we're gonna let that run for a second. But we'll keep going. So we're gonna edit here, go in here. We're gonna point to that ARM template. Copy. We're going to point, just for now, because I don't want to keep you here all night while we wait on that, we're going to point to the default parameters. We'll go in here. That's not liking it, so I'm going to go in here. I think shabam. Look at that, was prepared. Put those in here because I already know what my params are going to be. I'm going to override it. We're not going to do that file. Select incremental, hit save, hit OK. And then that is good. Who let the dogs out? And then we actually want to, that's cute. We're going to edit this, point to this, point to here, point to dev. Good. Okay. So let's go back to releases. And this is going to be .4. If we go in here, commits. That's in progress. Okay. Pull request, active, completed. All right, so we're gonna let this build pipeline run. Oh. Who let the dogs out? That ran to 7.9. Go back to releases. And then, okay, so that build pipeline. So, okay. So we committed to that collaboration branch, right? By adding that prod.json file, that kicked off the build pipeline, who let the dogs out, right? That ran. Once that completed, then it automatically kicked off release 3, or this release. And then in here, it kicked off. So once that build came available, it then kicked off the stage, right? So then it went to stage, and then it said it was successfully deployed the prod. So now if we go back in to here, let's do a new branch. We're gonna do end-to-end demo right now. So let's go feature pugs, right? Based on collab. This is my new, I don't want to do new pipeline. I lied. Get out of here. We'll keep it easy. And then my pug copy. pug copy pipeline. Let's go ahead and save. We pretended we did all that. We save that. Then we are, once that's fully saved, we know that we have this feature pugs branch out there. Let's do a pull request in the collab, adding the pug copy branch. We're going to create that. And this is going to be the life cycle of your developers. So every time they want to see something in live mode to like test triggers, they'll do a pull request. You might not necessarily want to delete pugs with that if you want to continuously do changes to there and keep pushing it to collab. So we will just go ahead and merge those changes. That should have kicked off a release pipeline. You see who let the pugs out is now running because we added pipeline copy pug. So now that build pipeline, that YAML file, is now running with that npm package. It's going to validate and generate that ARM template. And then when this guy is done, we will see a new release come up here. So we will see who let the pugs out, releases. We see a new release 4 that just showed up. It's in queue. So once this runs, we will see this go. Refresh. Do we have any questions while we're waiting on this to queue up and deploy? Waiting on hosted releases.
I love Steve's comment. Burn the branches with fire.
I've had to deal with some repos that were many years old, and the branch cleanups can be rough. So yeah.
Delete them. Where are we at here?
You can still get your history if you need it. You've got your pull request if you need it. So you're not really losing anything, just making it a little tidier.
And I think that's what I recommended, was to just, because you can always do the rollback, right, from that pull request. I forget how we did it.
You can revert a pull request really easily, or just look at the commits and use Git magic to do things. But Git magic requires a Git magician.
Yeah, because that's what I would do if like you identified like a bug in a release. You just roll that back, fix that bug, and redeploy.
Exactly. You revert, it just lays a new commit that's the opposite of the old one over the top of things and keeps it technically moving forward. You're not actually reverting a commit. You're just putting on a new commit that opposites the previous one. And yes, oppositing is a verb.
Oppositing. Oh, no. Oh, because I'm bad at my job. Okay.
No, the dreaded X.
You know what did that? The overwrite.
Of course it did.
Of course it did. So what do we call this? Dev, right? Because we are not deploying the test, we're deploying back to dev. Why would I do this to myself?
This is why those environments and pipeline variables exist.
Exactly.
You don't have to remember.
Dev, everything else is dev. Let's save. What is creative release? Okay.
But thanks for the great demo of the dangers of overrides.
Yes. And it probably is a better practice to keep those and to not have those override parameters hard-coded there, as you can see.
So, hey, Sean, are you going to cover global parameters also?
No. Do you want to? I've never used them.
No, global parameters are used, right? So you have to across the environments, right? If you want to pass some parameters, right? For example, right? You have a Azure Key Vault, right? Customers use, same link service, right? AKV for across all the thing, right? So you could make it global parameters, and that you could reuse in for each environment. You can look at, ADF global parameters. Okay?
Yeah, I'll put the link in there because it's right here.
Yeah, this will just help you further. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, it's delivery. I think I saw them. Is not going to. I'm losing my mind here. I've been staring at this all day. All right. I'm publishing. I thought we had a global parameter one with CI/CD. People do that. I never was with the using the same resource across environment kind of train. I don't know if Steve or anyone else in the call who does that. But I've always had, like, even in here, I've had a AKV for prod because, you know, I don't know.
It's pretty common to have like a different key vault for each environment. There obviously will be sets of different things, and having that configuration stored someplace that's version controlled is very helpful.
Yeah, I just but yeah, I know global frames came after my time as an engineer, so I never found myself using them.
Yeah, this is relatively new, but it is widely used. Yeah.
Global parameters.
I put a link there. Okay, right. Yeah.
Thank you.
CI/CD improvement. See, the title starts with CI/CD improvement. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, I saw that right here in the ARM template. Include global parameters in the ARM template.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought they already were, or maybe not.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so let's see if this worked. So stage 1 was successful. I think this is the same one. I got so many. I'm gonna start closing these out. Get out of here. All right, so we are gonna go back into Azure Dev. So what we did was we just deployed back to Dev, right? So nobody had to come in here and manually select publish, right? So we're gonna go back to live mode and see if my pug pipeline is here, which I hope it is. And the pug copy is here. Okay, so then, right, and we're almost done, is you just add stages using that artifact, right? We have, right, so we have stage 1, which is really going to be back to dev, and then stage 2 would be test, stage 3, potentially prod, right? And you can use that same artifact to go all the way, but you're going to have a lot of these, or maybe you don't want to. Maybe you want to take this, or take that collab branch, that commit to that collab branch that you're like, this is it, and merge that into a release branch. So that's kind of what I would do, or what I have done, is that I would have not only a collab branch, but I would do a release branch, right? Where I keep everything how it is with that release pipeline to dev, but when I want to go to test or prod, I'll do a pull request from collab into the release branch of collab, the version of collab that's ready to go out, and then that way I have a release branch I know it works in collab, and I can take that all the way through. And I think that was it.
That was awesome end to end, but also all the fun things that you got to just sprinkle in there to keep us engaged. Really hats off.
So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Later.